Hi everyone, I'm the plant propagator and welcome to my channel. It is 78 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 25 degrees Celsius. Beautiful day here in Southwest Florida. It's mid-April and it's nice. It's a little cool. It's supposed to get warmer a little later on this week. Humidity is high, but it's just a great day. I'm really excited to be here. I'm back after spending time in the Midwest U.S. and I spent most of the day yesterday in the laboratory. I have so much that I want to share with you, some pretty exciting results, but I'm not in the laboratory today. I've got a lot of first blooms, new blooms, new things going on, and I'm just excited to be here and to be able to share all of these things with you in the coming days and weeks. Before I get going today, I do want to give a shout out to Stephen Van Kampen Lewis, who is a fellow YouTuber. I appeared on his channel a few months ago and didn't have a chance to thank him for that opportunity. We talked about use of hydrogen peroxide as a treatment for orchids, how it should be applied, and he wanted my views as a scientist going in. So I did some research on it. I had my own experience with it, of course, but I wanted to really make sure I was up to speed on it for the interview with him. I really enjoy. I've actually met him in person. He's from Austin, and I've met him in person. He's a very knowledgeable orchid grower. He focuses on catasetums and cattleyas. The important thing is, well, the important thing, he knows a lot about orchids, but the other thing that I wanted to share with you is that he's an orchid judge. So he comes at it from a little bit of a different side than I would. I'm not a judge. I don't want to be a judge, and that's just how it is. It takes a lot of training and time in order to be certified as an AOS orchid judge, and he met those criteria. So he'll give you a little bit of a different viewpoint on things. All right. So, hey Stephen, if you're watching, hey. So I wanted to share just a few things with you today, and I've got some new blooms right here that I'm really excited about. The interesting thing about these blooms is I had no idea that these plants were about to bloom when I left, which was, maybe about 3.5 weeks ago, and I came back to these new blooms. The exciting thing about these blooms is they are plants that I grew from seed. These are progeny of Llory Ann, and I had one progeny of Llory Ann bloom before, and that one looked a little bit different from these guys. So a little bit of a history on that. This is Llory Ann Paradise that I had, and the original plant is actually not in my collection anymore, but I used her successfully for a couple of crosses. This happens to be a self of Llory Ann. I flasked that seed on, I gotta look at my notes here, 10/14/19. So about 3.5 years ago, I flasked the seed. And this is a picture, I'll show you a picture of the flower of the parent plant, and this is my parent plant. And it's a beautiful flower. It's a little small, flared petals, really nice flower color. And there was some fragrance associated with that flower as well. The first progeny flower that I had from this, that one bloomed about a little over 6 months ago, so that actually bloomed within 3 years of flasking from seed. And this is an image of the flower from that plant. Now, this plant was gifted to the Plant Propagator Junior, and it didn't bloom in April. It bloomed a few months ago, but that plant was grown in a greenhouse in my old university. So when you grow in a greenhouse with supplemental lighting, the orchid gets different signals. If there's any photoperiod sensitivity to it, which apparently these guys, there is, then the timing of the flowering is going to be off a little bit. So that plant bloomed off cycle from these guys. The original Llory Ann bloomed in April. These guys are blooming also in April. I really like this bloom, but this bloom is pretty nice as well, and it gives you a little bit of an understanding of the genetics behind orchid flowers. So Llory Ann is a hybrid between Robert Strait and Jungle Flare. Now, Jungle Flare, I don't have a high-resolution image of Jungle Flare. There weren't too many that were out there, but I've got a low-resolution image that I'm going to put up on the top of the screen, and that has some of the. It doesn't really have any flaring, which is interesting. But it has some, the parent of that actually had some spots. But Robert Strait, on the other hand, does have some flaring, and it does have some real, I actually have Robert Strait in my collection right over there, and that's used in a lot of crosses. So I want this, the one that I have, to get larger and bloom a little bit more. The Robert Strait that I have is, I think it's called Blue Hawaii or something like that, so it has a little bit more of a purplish color to it. I don't know which Robert Strait was a parent of this. There's some variations in Robert Strait. But the interesting and the bottom line is when you take a look at the flowers that you get from this, there's certainly some similar characteristics to it, but there's also some differences. So this flower is interesting because it's mostly a solid color. You don't have that much flaring on it. You don't have any, the other one I'll show you in a minute, you don't have any spots on any of the sepals on this plant. And it's a nice plant, single bloom. It's okay, but it's very different from really the parents and the siblings the one that I've shown you and one that I'm about to show you. What you get when you make a self-hybridization, a self on a plant, is that you get the parents and then beyond. What happens when you make a self is that you can bring out some recessive traits in the plant. So you'll see some things that you'll get mostly, sorry, I'm repeating myself, look similar to the parent, to the parent plant. And you'll see it arrange out to what the grandparents of that plant look like. But then you'll also see a little bit more than that, because when you self, you can see some recessive traits that are going to be brought out that otherwise would be hidden. So I think this is why you see in this progeny plant, you see something different from the parent of this plant as well as the grandparents of this plant. So it's a really different flower. This flower over here is one that I really like. It has the flaring that drew me to Llory Ann, but the other thing is it has these spots on the sepals. And Llory Ann has some spots, but not as pronounced as this. So I really like the additional spots that you can see on the sepals of this plant. I'm excited about having both of them. It's kind of interesting that they bloomed at the same time. Again, it shows the point that orchids can tell time, and they're sensitive to photoperiods, so they know what's going on, and these are progeny, and they bloomed at the same time as the parent plant that I don't even have anymore in my collection. I do have some other Llory Anns that are with me that haven't bloomed yet. So I've got one here and here, and from this I want to bring up the point that how many plants, when you make a cross and when you make a self, how many plants do you want to keep? I've heard people say different things. Because my collection is so small, I can't keep that many. So I'm thinking I'm only going to keep about 10. And that's about what I have of this that's around. I've given a lot of them away. But again, this was one of the first flasks, one of the first capsules that I flasked, again, 3.5 years ago. But you don't want to keep, how many do you want to keep? Well, you want to see all the variation of the color, but I also, and the patterns and the styles and everything else that you see in these, but you also, you got to make room, and you can't, I probably generated thousands, tens of thousands of these, and I don't have space for that. Some of the commercial growers will keep, 100 to 500 to 1,000 of these, but, and again, they'll sell them. I just don't have the space to do that. But so I think for me, what's reasonable is to keep 10 plants, unless it's something that I really like. So, one other thing that I wanted to point you, as I'm sitting here, I can smell these guys. So there is some fragrance. The parent was fragrant. Again, that's one of the things that I'm drawn to on orchids, and that's what I really like about cattleyas. And as the wind is blowing out here, you can get the fragrance. And the interesting thing is, as I smell these, excuse me, that's just a great fragrance right there. That's a better fragrance. So it's interesting that these orchids, these two sister plants, progeny plants, sibling plants, they smell mostly the same, but there's a little bit of a difference to them. And I don't want to get into the genetics of fragrance because I'm not sure how much is known about that. I certainly don't know a whole lot about that. I have talked to some breeders before where they tried to breed for fragrance and they were largely unsuccessful. And it's interesting, just even by generating progeny of these, this smells very different from the other one. So it's really interesting, the fragrance. But this one, I really like this. I can't wait till this plant gets a little bigger. It's also, if you can see, it has 2 flowers on it. This one only has 1. This one's a keeper. I'm not sure what I want to do with this one. The other thing while I'm thinking about it is this one's growing in bark and this one's growing in leca. I don't know if that's it. I think it's just this plant just looks a lot bigger, looks a lot more flush. And again, I can't wait for these other guys to bloom. All right, so one other thing that I want to share with you is that, Llory Ann, it's a nice plant. The flower's a little small, Cattleya, but it's still a nice plant. It hasn't been used to generate that many hybrids and that many crosses. But there are 15 registered progeny of Llory Ann. Oh, and I should mention the progeny of Llory Ann are also called Llory Ann. So even though these flowers will look different, because of the registration system in orchids, this is Llory Ann and this is Llory Ann, and they're all the same thing, and they may be named differently if they get awarded, but that's not happening anytime soon on these guys because they're small. But there's 15 progeny that are listed, and one of the progeny is this, and this is mine. So this is actually a Ports of Paradise times Llory Ann Paradise. And I named this Boing, B-O-I-N-G, after my breeding group that I formed with the Gulf Coast Orchid Alliance. This, Llory Ann it's kind of a small plant. Ports of Paradise is a big plant. I've got lots of Ports of Paradise here. Big flower, big yellow flower, beautifully fragrant, and I'm really excited to see what this looks like. And the other thing is that I gave most of these that I had away. So I don't have that many of them. Usually I like to keep some because the seedlings, they're tough to grow and some of them don't make it. But I don't have that many of Boing, of this progeny plant from Llory Ann. But I'm really excited to see what the flower looks like. This one's doing well. It's got a nice root system. The plant's growing pretty vigorously. Both of the parents, Llory Ann Ports of Paradise, is a really vigorous plant. And like I said, I have quite a few of those. So, maybe I'm not even sure when I flashed this, probably about a year ago, year and a half maybe, but probably in between that. I'm really interested to see how this turns up. It's doing well. It's going to keep on growing. Not quite ready to repot, but soon. I like giving these guys lots of room. Okay, so that's all I have for today. I went on a little long because I'm so excited, but I have so many other things to show you, both in the laboratory and in my collection, that I can't wait, but I gotta spread it out just a little bit. All right, so that's all I have for today. If you liked what you saw today and you want to keep on seeing my videos, it would help me out if you can click on like, share, and subscribe to my channel if you're not already a subscriber. All right. That's it. Again, I hope you enjoyed it, and happy propagating.